Michelle, is all the tribe here? Because I can't tell. All the
So
teachers. That's all right. I think so. I think so, right?
it looks like all
Yeah.
of the groups are
Okay.
here.
All right.
I think everyone came straight down. So.
Good morning, everyone. Today is a very special day, and we are very excited and honored to have the author of Red Butterfly, Miss A.L. Amy Sonicson here. And before we start, I would like to have someone special who has a very close and a relationship with her to come and briefly describe how it was to grow up with her. Miss Pardini, can we have Miss Pardini?
It's true. I have known this author all of my life. She is my older sister, and you'll hear some stories from her. I wanted to share a story, and actually, I think you might be a bit shocked by the story because I'm going to admit doing something that was wrong as a child. But my sister Amy was always writing ever since I can remember. I think as soon as she learned how to write, she was writing down these little stories and creating books and things like that. One thing I was very interested in reading that she had written was her diary. And she did keep I think you did write in diaries almost every day from the age of what? From about the age of 7. So I found these very interesting because sometimes when we would have arguments or disagreements, and we did fight quite a bit as children. I would want to see like, oh, what did she say about this, or what did she say about me? And one time, I remember reading something that she had said about me that was not very nice. In fact, I even thought like, oh, if I told my parents about this, she would be in so much trouble. And I was a bit of a tattletale. That's another thing I'll confess right now. So I remember thinking like, oh, I'm gonna tell my parents like that she, called me this word, or yes, she's gonna get in so much trouble. And then I finally realized that, oh, if I tell them that, I'm going to have to admit that I was reading her diary, which I might get in trouble for. So anyway, yeah, I'm so happy that my sister can share with you about her book and also about the writing, the process that she went through writing it and getting it published. So yeah, I'll give it back to Mrs. Sun. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Pardini. Let's now welcome Miss Sonicson to share with us and what inspired her to write this novel in verse.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. So I know you already know who I am because I've already been introduced. Let me see if I can make this work. So my name is A.L. Sonicson. This is my book, Red Butterfly. It's the first book that I've had published, and it is written for children between the ages of about 3rd grade and up through 6th, 7th, 8th grade. So you all are middle schoolers, is that right? Cool. Okay, so this book will be perfect age for you. I thought I'd start off with just a little peek back since Miss Pardini already talked a little bit about our childhood. Do you recognize anyone in this picture? Miss Pardini's the really cute one in this picture. I'm the one in the red dress, and that's our mother who's down here, Mrs. Pardini, who works in the office. Yeah, in HR. So this is when we first moved to Hong Kong. Miss Pardini and I both grew up here. And she was 2 years old, and I was 5 years old. And we lived in Kowloon Tong. So this is the first house we lived in. Now this house is torn down, And there's a big building, a big apartment building there instead. We both went to ICS, so I don't know if you can recognize anyone in this photo. Do you see Miss Pardini? I know she loves her hair in this picture. She's in the front right there. And I'm the second row down with the curly bangs. I also love my hair in this picture. So this was, we started going to ICS when it first opened, 1992. So I was in 10th grade, and Michelle, what were you? 7th, she was in 7th grade. And I was in the second graduating class of ICS in 1995. So it's a privilege to be back at my old school. And as you can see, the uniforms have changed a little bit. We had to wear those pins and white shirts. And you guys have it a lot better now, I think. Okay, oh, this is a really bad picture. But anyway, I moved away from Hong Kong when I turned 18, and I went to college in the United States. I met my husband there. We got married. And then after we were married, he went and got his master's degree in teaching. And after he got his master's degree, we went to China to live. So we actually lived in mainland China for 8 years. So we lived in the city of Tianjin, which is up near Beijing. Have any of you visited Tianjin by any chance? Anybody? Yeah, a few teachers, yeah. Oh, okay, a few people, great. All right, maybe. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit more about Tianjin in a minute, but that Tianjin is the setting for my book, Red Butterfly. All right, so our time in China was really fun. I was kind of a super mom while I was living there. I will just brag about that. I'm just kidding. We rode bikes a lot. We didn't have a car, and that was our main way of getting around. So I piled our kids. We had an oldest daughter who is adopted from China, and that is a story unto itself that I'll get into in a minute. We also had 3 birth children who were born in China, in Beijing. So this is my son Gabe and my daughter Anna, and then I'm pregnant with my daughter Sophie. And Anna's actually visiting here with me. She's in the front row, visiting Hong Kong. Do you want to stand up for a minute? Everyone's looking at you. No? Okay. So I love to load up the bike with all my stuff. And there we are in Beijing. That's after Sophie was born. You can see her little baby Sophie peeking out there. So this is at the Forbidden City in Beijing. And that's my oldest daughter, Olivia. She does not look happy in that picture. But okay, and this is the kids now. That's my oldest daughter, Olivia, and Gabe. So Olivia's now in 8th grade. Gabe is in 6th grade. Anna's in 4th. Sophie's in 1st. And Naomi is our littlest one. She was born in America after we moved back, after we lived in China, and she's 5 years old. Okay, so Tianjin. Tianjin, where we lived for 8 years in China, it has a part of the Great Wall in it, up in the north part of the Tianjin district, but it's a very large city. For those of you who have been there, you probably know what Chinese cities are like. 12 million people live there, and historically it was the gateway to Beijing, which is why it has its name Tianjin, because it's Heaven's Gate. So the canals would run up to Beijing. Okay, so now I'll talk a little about my book, now that you have some background about me. And while we were in China, I guess I'll back up a little bit more. When I was at ICS, I had an opportunity to go up to China for a teaching trip with a friend of mine, another student. And we taught at a women's English college for 2 weeks up in Fuzhou. And while we were there, we had a life-changing experience. We got to visit an orphanage. And I'd never been inside a Chinese orphanage before. I'd heard about them, but I'd never actually been in one. And it was quite a difficult experience, just to see so many children there who didn't have families. And when I was going through the hallway, I saw a door kind of cracked open. It was still dark. It was dark inside, and I heard a baby crying. So I probably should not have gone in there, but I did. And there was a little baby with a cleft lip and palate who had been left to die in this dark room because the IEs didn't feel like they could feed the baby. Because the babies, with cleft lip and palate, you have a hole. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but you have a hole in your lip and sometimes in the roof of your mouth. You're born that way, and if you don't have a special bottle, it's hard to eat. You can choke. So I guess the IEs who worked in the orphanage didn't feel like they could help this baby, so they thought, well, we might as well let the baby die because we can't feed the baby. So I was holding the baby and crying because I wanted to help the baby, but I was only 17 years old and there was nothing I could do. And so it was a very difficult experience, and I felt horrible for that baby. And so as I left, I thought, I would love to come back to China someday and do something to help babies like this. Well, so I got my wish after we were married and we moved back to China, and immediately I started volunteering at the orphanage. And I think it was after I'd been there about a week, I walked into the baby room and there was a new baby who had just been brought in. And immediately I noticed her because she had a cleft lip and palate almost exactly the same as the baby in that orphanage in Fuzhou. And so I really loved that baby the first moment I saw her. But since I had just moved to China, I literally had just moved to China like a couple weeks before. So I was just there. I was like, maybe this isn't the best time to try to adopt a baby when I just moved here. But after a few weeks, she was becoming weaker and weaker, and she was losing weight, and she didn't have, she wasn't crying anymore. She would just lie there in her crib, and I was really worried about her. And then one day, the orphanage was doing some renovation and moving some furniture around, and she was moved to a different room, and I walked in, and she just had her bottle stuck in her mouth. Like she was just lying on her back with her bottle stuck in her mouth, which is very dangerous because she could breathe in the milk and die. So I went to the orphanage director and asked, can I bring this baby home just for a little bit and take care of her until she's stronger? And so she said yes. So that very day, she bundled this little baby up, and I took her home. I didn't even talk to my husband about it. So I show up at home with a baby. And he was actually away at camp. They do a spring camp. Or, no, not spring. I guess it was an opening of school camp. And remember, we had just arrived in China. He had never been in Asia before except to visit Hong Kong one time. And so this is all very new for him. And then I bring home a baby. So you can imagine he got home from camp and he was really surprised. And we kept that little girl. We named her Olivia. And then after a few months, she got stronger, and we just couldn't take her back to the orphanage. I'm sure you saw that coming. So she is our oldest daughter who's adopted, but it was a long road to adopting her. It took us 7.5 years to adopt her because we had to wait a long time because I was not old enough. I was only 24 when I brought her home, and you have to be, by Chinese law, you have to be 30 years old to adopt a baby. So we had to wait a long time. So through that experience, I learned a lot about foster care in China. I learned a lot about the adoption process, and I also met a lot of other people with stories about adoption. And that's what inspired my book, Red Butterfly. All those stories and even what I went through myself. So Red Butterfly is definitely a fictional story. It is not about my daughter or anyone else that I know. It's who I know. It's purely fictional. But it is inspired by something that's very close to my heart because of my experiences. So let's see. I guess we'll talk a little bit about, does anyone have any questions before I keep going about anything I've mentioned so far? And I'm planning still to talk about the writing process and how the book's written. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to read it yet, but it is a little bit of a different style of book. So, I don't know, any questions about growing up with Miss Pardini or anything like that before I move on? No? Okay. All right, so I first wrote this book a long time ago, probably 6 years ago I started writing it. And I wrote it as longer than that actually. Oh yeah, probably about 6 years. I first wrote it for a young adult audience, so I wrote it for high schoolers. And then I realized after I finished the first draft, I sent it off to a friend of mine to read. And I don't know how familiar you are with the writing process, but it's a great idea when you're writing to get feedback from other people. And so I have some trusted writing friends who I know will give me honest feedback. And so I sent it to her, and she wrote back and said, you know what, I just don't feel like, excuse me, that Kara, she's the main character, that her voice sounds authentic for her age. I think she sounds too young. I think she sounds too immature, because in my first draft of the story, she was 16 years old. I feel like my mic is really loud. Does it sound really loud to you? Okay. Yeah, so at first I thought, well, I don't know whether to take this feedback seriously or not, because, when you get feedback, you need to weigh it. You need to decide, is this something I really want to change about the book? You have to think about it, and it's good to keep an open mind and not, because when you write, you feel very protective of your work. You don't want anyone to criticize it, but it's important to be open and to take the criticism and see if there's anything that can help you to get better. So I decided to think about her criticism and I was at first defensive, thinking, well, Kara, she grew up in a very sheltered environment. She was isolated at the beginning of the book. Like, she grew up with an older woman taking care of her who was not her birth mother. It was a foster mother, an unofficial foster mother. And so, of course, she's going to be immature, because even though she's 16, she's never been around other kids. She's just been with this older woman her whole life. And so I had that defensive attitude. But then I started thinking about it some more, and I thought, well, maybe I should make this for a younger audience. Maybe I could make Kara younger, and then I could write it for a different audience. So that's what I ended up doing. I rewrote the whole book, and at the time, I had just started reading verse novels. Have any of you read a novel in verse before? Yeah? I can see a couple hands. Okay, so a novel in verse is written entirely in poetry, and usually in free verse. Not always in free verse, but my book is written in free verse, and a lot of the verse novels that I really enjoyed were written in free verse. So I probably should have had a screenshot of what this looks like, but if you look through the book, if you glance through it, it's not written like with chapters, normal chapters, and in prose, but instead in poetry. So the poems are quite short, and the words are really spread out on the page. So even though it looks like quite a thick book, it is a very quick read because the words are so spread out. But it's poetry that tells a continuing story. So it is a novel, and the poems all come together to tell the whole story of Kara's story. And I started reading, first novel I read was Karen Hess's novel, Out of the Dust. Why? Oh, you guys are reading it? Great, yeah, oh, right, perfect. So you know what I'm talking about. Are you finding it good? Did you already read it, or? Really? Perfect timing. Yeah, that's a sad book, right? It's sad. I tried to read it to Anna, my 9-year-old, and she was crying so hard at the beginning of the book that we couldn't continue. So I think we have to wait until she's a little older to finish it. But it is such a good book, and I loved it. And I thought, I would love to try to write Kara's story in verse instead of just in regular prose. And I thought, I'll just try it, And the good thing about when you're a writer, you can just try lots of things, and it's good to just try new things. So I tried writing in verse, and I realized that I loved it. That it was perfect for Kara's personality, that I really thought that was the way she would kind of speak in this very poetic way with lots of images and just very sparse language, not a lot of words. She doesn't have a lot of words, so she says what she's thinking very quickly and concisely. So it worked out really well for her personality. So I started writing it, and I wrote the book so quickly, that second draft so quickly, and just because I kind of already knew where I wanted the story to go, and then when I wrote in poetry, it just flowed really, really well. So I finished in poetry. I did a lot of editing after that, which you always have to do before you send something off um, to anyone. And so I edited quite a lot, and then I thought, okay, I think it's ready. And at the time, I had an agent. So an agent in the literary world is their job. It's pretty hard to get an agent at first. And I had finally gotten this agent with another book that I had written, because I wrote 4 books before this, books that weren't published. So for the 4th one, I got this agent. And she took that book, that other book, and she tried to sell it to editors. And so she was kind of my business person who took care of the business side of my books. But we couldn't find an editor who wanted to buy that book. And so then I sent her this new book and said, well, Red Butterfly. I said, can we try with this one instead? And she read it, and she said, I don't really like this book, so I'm sorry. I'm not going to send it to editors. Oh, I guess it turned off. Thanks, Michelle. Miss Pardini, I mean. So that was probably the most discouraging time in my writing journey, because as Miss Pardini said, do you know her first name? Now you do. I wrote my whole life, and in college, I majored in writing. It's something I've always done, and it's been a dream of mine for a long, long time to have a book published. And so, that time when my agent said, no, I don't like this book, and I'm not going to try to sell it to publishers, I felt so discouraged, because I really believed in this book. Like, this was the first book I thought, I really think that this has a great chance of getting published. And so that was the first time I think I really considered quitting, just giving up. Like, this is too hard, I don't want to do this anymore, because I had spent years and years before that even trying to get an agent, and then the thought of this agent not wanting my book was very discouraging. So I decided to not stay discouraged, though, and I picked myself up. I told the agent, okay, well, I guess if you're not willing to sell the book and you don't like it, then we'll just part ways and I'll find a new agent, which was scary, very scary. But that was a good move, and I actually did find a new agent very quickly, thankfully, and then this book sold quite quickly after that. And as a matter of fact, it was interesting, and I'm just saying this not like boasting or anything, but just to remind you not to give up too easily on your dreams, because I could have given up when that agent said, this book is worthless. Well, she didn't say that, but that's what she was implying. I could have given up, but when my new agent sold it, 3 publishers wanted it. They were all fighting over it. So that shows that not everyone, just because someone gives you some bad news or some discouraging words, don't take that to heart. Keep going, keep trying, because a lot of times they say the darkest part of a journey toward your dream is right before you realize your dream. So I just encourage you, whatever your dream is, just keep going for it, and don't give up too easily. So yeah, I got to pick which publisher I liked the best, and I went with Simon & Schuster, which is a big publisher out of New York City. And I just really enjoyed talking to that editor, and I thought that he really understood what I wanted to do with the book. And so we began the editing process, and that was a long time. I think from the time I decided to go with Simon & Schuster until the book actually was published was 1.5 years. And that whole time I was busy doing edits and rewriting. I had to add a 3rd part to the book. Originally, the book is in 3 parts, and originally I just had 2 parts. But my agent and the editor both thought I should add more to the ending, so I did. So there was a lot of rewriting, a lot of editing. They hired an illustrator, and as you can see, she did a beautiful job. Her name is Amy. My name is Amy, and her name is Amy. And I've never met her or even talked to her. I've never got an email from her. I've never contacted her at all. So it was pretty amazing to me that she did such a brilliant job with the illustrations. And funnily enough, when they gave her this job, they thought, well, we'll just have a few. We need someone to do the cover. We need someone to do a few illustrations for the inside. And she read the book, and I guess she was crying after she read the book. This is my editor told me this, because I haven't talked to her. But she came back with 70 illustrations, 70, instead of the few that she was supposed to deliver. So that was great. So they said, okay, I guess we'll illustrate the book then. So they put in about half of what she had done, about 35 illustrations, I think was the final number. And I just think she did a remarkable job. She made her own newspaper print in Chinese using some of the words from the book. She translated them into Chinese and then made her own newspaper print, tore it up, pasted it onto the paper, and then used Chinese ink over the torn up newspaper. So that was I thought, really a neat way to do the illustration. So this picture is one of my favorite in the book, and it's Kara, and she's riding her bicycle, which when I was in China, as I showed you the picture of me with all my kids on my bicycle, but riding my bicycle is one of my favorite things to do when I lived in China, just because it was so free. I felt so free when I was riding my bicycle. I could go anywhere I wanted to in the city, and Tianjin is very, very flat, so it's really easy to ride a bicycle. There aren't any hills. And so so Kara, she also loves riding her bicycle. And I think because, like I mentioned before, she's very isolated. Her childhood has been very isolated. This is the time that she can feel free, when she's out on her own riding her bicycle. And plus, having her mother, her foster mother, is American. And so when she's out riding her bicycle, she fits in with the people around her more. You know, she's not an outsider. She feels like she belongs. And one thing I haven't mentioned about Kara is that she was born, one of the reasons why she was left by her birth parents is because she has no fingers on her right hand. And so she just has just a hand with no fingers, just a couple little nubs of fingers. And this is hard for her to deal with in the book. She feels like people won't accept her, so she tries to hide her difference, her hand difference. And actually, this kind of goes back to the illustrations, too. Her fingerless hand is her right hand, and when the illustrator, Amy Bates, did the illustrations, she accidentally, on probably, 9 or 10 of them, had the wrong hand with no fingers on it. And so it was a terrible thing. Like, you know, when you're going through all these stages of editing, and one of them is you get the whole book, and it's on a big, huge piece of paper, like a huge pile of paper, and you're going through and making sure everything's right. And so I was looking at the illustrations in the book as it would be printed, and I started to notice that she had drawn the wrong hand with the difference. And I was thinking, oh, do I say anything? I don't know what to do. I felt terrible. Like, she put so much work into this, and she got the wrong hand. Do I say anything? Do you think anyone will notice? And I'd let my father-in-law read it, and he came back and he said, I just couldn't help but notice that I got the wrong hand in a lot of these illustrations. I was like, okay, I'm really glad you said that, because now I know that people will notice. It won't be something that they just, maybe no one will notice. So I had to go back to the publisher and tell them, and she had to redo a lot of her illustrations. So that was too bad, but she still did an amazing job. But those are kind of the strange things that can happen during the publishing process. I was just thankful that the publisher is willing to change it. Okay, so I thought I would read a little bit. Maybe this is one of the poems from the book, and it's the 4th poem in the book, and it's probably one of my favorite poems, and it's where I got the title for the book itself, because the poem is called Red Butterfly, and it's talking about Kara riding her bike, which, as I mentioned before, is her favorite thing to do. So I'll read this poem. I ride with my hair whipping back, a long, flapping black flag. Wind presses my face, freezes my lips, laces the cracks in my knuckles with blood. The city is a blur. No one stares, no one asks questions when I am alone, pedaling my ruby red bicycle. No one knows I'm different, that I have an American mother, that even though I look Chinese, I'm American on the inside. When I ride, I am like the 10 million others moving in slow motion down frozen streets in January, except I am faster, flitting between them, a red butterfly. Okay, so that's where I got the name of the book, because she does feel so free, and I love the image of her hair flapping out behind her, almost like butterfly wings. This is another picture I really love about Kara. Let me see, how are we doing on time? 5 minutes? Okay. I guess I'll open it up. I don't know if anyone has any questions I've described enough about the publishing process. Okay. Does anyone have any questions or anything I missed talking about? Yeah. I don't think so. No. Actually, I don't. The way I work, I don't let a lot of people read it. I have my writing friends who I call them my critique partners, and they give me criticism, and my editor did, my agent, but I didn't even let my husband read it. He didn't read it until it actually came out. Like not even because we get an advanced reader copy too, which is the one before the actual book comes out, and he didn't even read that. He read when it actually came out, and I was so nervous when he was actually reading it because it was the first time he'd ever written anything that I've read anything that I've written. So, yeah, so I tend to not let people read very much. So, yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah. Okay, that's a great question. So the question was about royalties. The way it works, since I'm a first author, or first-time author, the way it works, and because I had several different publishers who are interested in the book, they all offered a certain amount of money, which they call an advance, and so that was all different depending on the publisher, and so I received that advance, and it was in my contract. So my agent helps to make sure that everything is legal and that I'm not being cheated by the publisher. That's one of her jobs. And so she worked it out in the contract. So I would get like half the advance when I turned in the book, like with the first round of edits. And then when I turned in the book with the final round of edits, I get the second half of the advance. And so I did get that advance, and then I have to earn back that money before I can receive any more money on royalties. So so it depends on how many books sell. If I make that money back, and I think I only get, it's not very much. I think it might only be like 2% of sales. So it can take a while to earn back. And a lot of times, first-time authors, I've heard, just maybe people are telling me this so I'll feel better, but they're like, don't worry, most first-time authors don't earn back. It's just with subsequent books that they start earning money. So yeah, it's an interesting process, and a lot of people have been very critical of publishing because of traditional publishing companies, because they do it this way. They give like sums of money on the front end before they know how the book will do out in the real world. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Okay. Yes. How many books have I published? So I have Red Butterfly out. And that's my only book right now. I do have another book coming out in June, but it doesn't have my name on it because I actually got an opportunity to work as a ghostwriter. Does anyone know what that is? Yeah. So it's where I write for a celebrity. So a celebrity wants to write a book, but they can't write, and so I was hired to write the book for them. Well, I shouldn't have said that. Now I have to say who it is. You know. Don't tell anyone I said that. Yeah, so I worked with the Olympic gymnast Shawn Johnson, who was in the 2008 Beijing Olympics, and she won gold medal, I think, gold or silver medal, something like that. Anyway, so I got to write a young adult novel for her. So she had an idea for this young adult novel about a gymnast, so I got to write it for her and work with her on it. So it has her name on the front. My name's on the inside. I'm a contributor. So, yeah. Contributed the words. Yes? Yeah. Oh, good question. Do I type or do I handwrite? When I was younger, we didn't have computer. So I started off handwriting. That was the olden days. And when we got a computer, I started typing, and then now I type everything. I cannot handwrite it anymore because I can type much faster than I can write. So, yep. Good question. Am I working on any of my own books? I do have 3 that I'm working on right now. So, yeah, I don't know if any of them will be published. We'll see. But I need to finish them. And, yeah, I write a lot of books at once, which probably isn't a good idea, but it's kind of the way it's worked in the past. So, yeah, I'm writing one about that's set in southern China back in the 1920s about a little boy who wants to run away and join Cantonese opera troupe. And so when I was in Tianjin, I actually got to sing opera. So I have an interest in it. So, yeah. But I won't sing it for you now because we don't have time. But maybe later, if you want to hear me sing opera, I will. Okay, I think we're out of time. So, are we? We still have time? So I can sing something? Can I? Okay. All right. This is, I think, I'm not a great speaker, but I really love singing opera. And I think this is what when I do presentations at schools, this is what most kids remember. Maybe nothing that I said, but they remember singing opera. Okay.
四方门前一枝梅，四香苗儿对大对，西家门子大大叫，将你两手抱起来。
So, sorry if you knew. That's from Butterfly Lovers, which is a Yuezhu opera, so it's not Cantonese opera, but it's still kind of Southern opera, not Beijing opera. So anyway, I know I probably made a lot of mistakes. It's been a long time since I've been on stage doing that, so kind of forgot. Yeah, okay, so how much? Oh, okay, all right, do you want to?
Okay, let's all thank Ms. Sonicson. And we have something for you. Ms. Sonicson, can you come up here? It's okay. And this is also for you. And if anyone has a book for Ms. Sonicson to sign, you can stay behind. And then I think you guys can be dismissed. That's it.